Ooh, I like your magical mystery background, Eugenie.
Hi.
Hi. Love your background. It looks very mysterious.
You know, Zoom has this new background and it's just called blur, and it blurs out everything. You go into oh boy, I think if you maybe just, how did I do that? I'm trying to think, if you right click on yourself or
Oh well, that's for another time. I just sent you a land acknowledgement slide, and I wrote one up specifically about climate change, so I hope it's okay.
Okay, that's great. And I'll do you want to do that after we show the video and before we start the talks? Is that a good spot for that?
I think generally it's like at the very start.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Because it just as a gesture to precede anything else, you know.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I'm backing up my chair.
And I can do the I can share my slide, or you can share it from your computer, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I'll just download it, and I have all this other slides opened up so I can just show it. Actually, yeah, that's good. Okay, I got it.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So you added something for climate change.
I don't know. Elena Sparrow was just in here, and she was like evaluating, you know, in our training and our land acknowledgement training, it was like, what's the spirit of the land acknowledgement? Are you just checking the box? And she's like, you should hone it into like this event so people know you're not just, and I was like, okay, Elena.
That's great. Is Elena able to come?
She's gonna show up. She's just heading to a doctor's appointment. She'll show up halfway through for the question.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because I felt a little badly. I didn't ask her this year, and then but that was mostly because I figured that
we're all too busy, even me. We're all a little too busy. So
yeah. So I didn't want to take up her time, and it seemed like you and I had a handle on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're eating your snack. That's good.
Let's eat it. I know.
Are you at school?
Yeah, I am.
That's good. Yeah.
When it says guest, I wonder who the heck it is.
Well, right now it says there are 4 people in the waiting room. Oh, I should pause the recording. Oh shoot, hang on. Don't let me forget to restart the recording now. Okay, I think it's just a little after 5 o'clock, and I think we should go ahead and get started. I'm Eugenie Euskirchen, and I'm co-moderating this Solve Climate by 2030 event with Katie Spellman, and we're here to welcome you. We're going to start off with a land acknowledgement from Katie. Let me just go ahead and share my screen and show you the land acknowledgement. Everyone see that?
Yeah, so we acknowledge that our Trothieta campus, which is pictured here, is on the unceded lands of the Lower Tanana peoples. We acknowledge and appreciate the teachings of generations of Alaska Native peoples who have had relationships with this land and demonstrated expertise in and resilience in innovation in navigating our environmental changes. We look forward to a future where equitable climate change research and action is guided by this experience. And we also acknowledge that a land acknowledgement at an event like this is only a small gesture in the great work that still needs to be done in this area.
All right, thank you, Katie. That was great. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to say a few words before our speakers. So we held our first edition of Solve Climate by 2030 on this date in 2020. And so that was, of course, just in the very beginning of the chaotic stages of the pandemic. And despite this, many of you recognize the fact that, well, the pandemic is temporary, our changing climate is not, and you tuned in. And so the idea behind Solve Climate by 2030 is that we essentially have about a 10-year window to make significant reductions in greenhouse gas emissions to hold warming to the low end of under 3 degrees Fahrenheit. And so if we don't have a reduction like this, it's highly likely that the global climate could be destabilized, and with all the attendant impacts on our socio-ecological systems. But we need to actually take an optimistic attitude towards this challenge by fostering collaborations locally. And so if the pandemic has actually taught us anything, it's that solving these complex global challenges like climate change, they're going to almost certainly depend on a combination of public sector funding and private sector ingenuity. So for example, the vaccines against COVID-19 exemplify the potential of human ingenuity when we're faced with a tremendous challenge. And so while climate change is a global problem, we actually need here to focus on local solutions. And that is the idea behind Solve Climate by 2030. And so during this week, beginning yesterday on April 6th, simultaneous global dialogue webinars, one in 50 different countries and in every US state are occurring. So there are currently this week 100 webinars worldwide. Solve Climate by 2030 is a project of the graduate programs in sustainability at Bard College. The project is co-led by my colleague Eben Goodstein, the director of the global programs in sustainability at Bard, and Dr. David Blockstein. And so as part of this Solve Climate by 2030, faculty at all levels and across the curriculum worldwide can assign viewing of these webinars live or recorded as homework, and then spend the next class discussing climate solutions. And so this is an opportunity not just for environmental studies classes. The challenges posed by solving climate change necessarily range across history, science, business, culture, economics, psychology, religion, government, media, journalism, and the arts. And so Solve Climate has disciplinary guides for follow-up discussions here for state level solutions and all these different webinars. And so at the end of this event, we're going to briefly show how to access these materials. And so tonight, this is our second version of the Alaska Solve Climate by 2020, and we're following up from last year. Last year, we had Terry Chapin and Bruno Greneau, Inai Begay and her daughter Nenej, and they provided a really broad range of perspectives and actions to take. And last year, it was, of course, a big election year in the US. And so one of the ways it was possible to get involved and take action was to simply vote. And of course, in our state, Alaska, with a very large land area and a small population, with 62% of the land federally owned, voting both at the national and local elections is always impactful. And so what is also significant in terms of climate change in Alaska right now is our approach to it has also been at the community level rather than at the state level. We currently do not have a statewide climate change task force or long-term consistent statewide policy on climate change. So please keep this in mind while listening to our speakers who represent a wide array of perspectives and actions. So before we get started, I want to just go through a few logistics here. First of all, please keep yourself muted. I think everybody knows that after a year of Zoom, but you would be surprised. And then we are recording this webinar. And so if you do not wish to be recorded, of course, keep your camera off and we will have a time for questions. And if you have questions, if you do not want to be recorded, just simply type them in the chat. We're going to be monitoring the chat And then even if you don't mind being recorded, you can type your questions in the chat regardless. And so we're going to save questions until the end. And each of our speakers will take questions at that time. And so before we go any further, I need to show you a video that has been produced by Bard College with Eben talking a little bit more about Solve Climate by 2030. So let me just get this video started and share my screen again.
While she's pulling it up, introduce yourself in the chat. My name's Katie. I'm from Fairbanks. Darcy, where are you calling in from? Nate, Lindy, Shelby.
All right.
Welcome, Kaitlin from Clam Gulch. Welcome, Jillian from Eagle River.
Everyone can see that now? All right, let me just start playing it.
Welcome, Eric from Dillingham, Shelby from Kenai, Darcy in Denver. All right.
Welcome to the Solve Climate Global Dialogues. You're participating in one of 125 events held across the planet, including in almost all 50 US states, part of a global project called Solve Climate by 2030. My name is Eben Goodstein, and I'm an economist and director of the graduate programs in sustainability at Bard College in New York, the lead organizer for Solve Climate. This last year has been difficult for everyone. As the world looks forward to recovery from COVID, we are focusing tonight on the most important question facing humanity. What can we do in this year in our regions to help solve climate change while supporting struggling communities that have faced widespread loss of life, economic disaster, and joblessness? Worldwide, from Australia to Kyrgyzstan, from Colombia to Malaysia, and from South Carolina to South Africa, Solve Climate audiences are hearing from local experts and young leaders about concrete steps that can really help nations solve climate change while creating much needed jobs and incomes for everybody. The year 2020 was one of the two hottest years in human history, bringing with it massive forest and grassland fires, record-breaking storms and hurricanes, and relentless rising seas. Solving climate is the challenge which the human species must now face. There's hope for the future. Solutions have continued to advance. This year, China committed to building a carbon neutral economy, while the US rejoined the Paris Agreement. Solar, wind, and battery prices continue to fall, while major car companies have been rushing to electrify the global fleet. Worldwide, movements for Black Lives Matter and Me Too are leading in bringing much delayed and urgently needed justice to the world. Time is short. We have until 2030, 10 years to solve climate. We can get a lot done in this decade. We have the solutions, but only if we focus the world on climate solutions and justice, and then do the work we have to do in our own cities and regions. For students listening, you are the leaders. Without you, the future we envision will not come. I'm asking tonight for your help. We're going to discover powerful ideas for climate solutions and climate justice and how you can be a part of the solution. But this message must reach beyond those of us who are listening right now. Would you ask all your teachers this week in every subject to make climate a class? The teacher can assign tonight's webinars homework for the students, and then afterwards have a one-class period discussion. And we mean every subject, from art to engineering, psychology to business, dance to chemistry. Teachers don't need to be a climate expert to lead a discussion about climate change. The Solve Climate project has easy-to-use teachers' guides in nearly every subject and in 3 languages to help teachers make climate relevant to their class. It only takes courage. Don't take no for an answer. Ask them, why not? This is your future. You'll be surprised how many teachers will say yes. Thank you. Imagine you, thousands of leaders like you around the world asking their teachers once every school term to make climate a class. That means every term going forwards, hundreds of thousands, millions of students worldwide in their classes talking about climate solutions. COVID has shown how fragile our global economy and society are to extreme events. It's also shown that vulnerable people are facing the hardest, most damaging impacts. This is also true with climate change. Science has made it clear that unchecked, global warming will mean an unending onslaught of extreme events, causing untold suffering for humanity and all creatures, species driven to extinction, a planet of environmental refugees. And yet, in many ways, this is the most exciting time to ever be alive as a human. We have the tools and networks and technologies to rewire the world with clean energy, reimagine the global food system, reinvent transportation, and regenerate forests and grasslands, and be well on our way to solving climate by 2030. Tonight, we will learn how to do this in our own cities, our own towns, our own regions. Thank you for the work you will do to promote climate solutions and a just world.
All right, so with that, I'm gonna turn over the table to Darcy Peter. Darcy is with the Tanana Chiefs Conference, Climate Change Advisory Committee, and also the Woodwell Climate Research Center. She's going to be talking about climate action across communities.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. She said I'm Darcy Peter. Thanks for coming, also for having me. As she said, I'm with Woodwell Climate Research Center, which is in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, but kind of shifted. I'm changing gears here a little bit to do more work on the ground with Tanana Chiefs Conference. My role at Woodwell Climate is as a research assistant and scientist. And then at TCC, I'm kind of shifting towards the Climate Change Advisory Committee. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to do a land acknowledgement. I'm giving this, brief talk from Denver, Colorado, which is on Arapaho and Cheyenne land. I got stuck here due to the snowstorm in Fairbanks, but usually I'm based in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is on the Dene land of the lower Tanana people. So I'm from Beaver, Alaska. It's about 100 miles north of Fairbanks along the Yukon River. I'm Gutch Athabaskan, and as I said, I'm a scientist, but I also try to stay pretty involved in policy and with TCC and their advocacy program there. So for those of you who don't know, TCC or Tanana Chiefs Conference covers about 235 square miles of Alaska and pretty much every interior community in the state, right? And so that's about 37% of the whole state, which is just slightly smaller than the state of Texas. There's a visual for you. And in the TCC region, we have 6 subregions. There's the Yukon Flats, the Upper Tanana, the Yukon Tanana, the Yukon Kayakuk, the Lower Yukon, and the Lower Kuskokwim. And back in 2019, just before the pandemic, Chief Rhonda Pitka of Beaver, which is where I'm from, submitted a resolution that got passed by the full board of directors at TCC to establish a climate change task force. And with the COVID-19 pandemic and other things, it finally got formed just before the pandemic. I have the most amazing boss in the world, and she said that I can kind of shift gears since I'm already based in Fairbanks to start work on the ground at TCC. I have been involved with TCC and with their hunting and fishing task force since about 2017, since I graduated from college. And I'm, heavily involved in the North Pacific Fishery Management Council, which is, basically just an entity that controls all commercial fishing up to 200 miles off the coast of Alaska. So TCC has a voice in that. Brooke Woods, Ben Stevens, a lot of people are behind the scenes and help with that work to try to increase the advocacy there and to, protect king salmon. So that's one thing that I do. But like I said, I think that there's a huge connection between science and policy. And I think that a lot of it is missed a lot of the times by scientists because it's out of sight, out of mind, right? Like I'm gonna go do field work and do my thing and keep my head down. Maybe I work, for a school or something and, my funding doesn't require me to work with people or talk with people. So I'm not going to. And I think that, to me, that is a little it's pretty silly. It's a really infantile thing to do, because there's a clear connection between science and policy, and therefore science and people. And if you're not talking to the people on the ground, if you're doing research that is good research, and you're not talking to people and telling them what you're finding, then what good is your research, right? Like, what good is research if it only benefits other researchers? And so my boss understands that and fully supports me, and has allowed me to continue my work with TCC and with other boards that I sit on that advocate for subsistent hunting and fishing in the state of Alaska. But I'm mostly really excited about this TCC task force, or advisory committee, as the name has since been changed. We're working really closely with a bunch of different entities based in Alaska that are nonprofit and that are in this line of work. There's a lot of past climate change work that TCC has done that we're gonna, bring back up again. We're gonna work directly with tribes. We're gonna have, people nominated, hopefully, to sit on the advisory committee. And as these communities are seeing the impacts of climate change way more frequently and way more intensely, I think that I agree, obviously, with Chief Rhonda Pitka, that it should be of the utmost importance, and it needs to be established, and we do need to do more outreach and more for climate change, or to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So that's kind of my role that I've taken upon, like a lot of people. I have a lot of support. So many people, are behind the scenes. I'm just, the one that came in. I'm just the freshest one. Brooke Woods is online here. She can probably answer a lot of the, questions that you guys have. I can try. But thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thanks for showing up, and thanks for having this conversation in the state.
All right, thank you, Darcy. That was great to hear about. So next we have Charley Basham. She's from the Fairbanks Climate Action Coalition Interfaith Working Group, and she'll be talking about drawing on our faith to motivate action. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with some slides from Charley.
Don't share those until I'm ready, okay?
Oh, okay. All right. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks. Okay. Trying to get to my screen. So thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation about climate solutions and to see all of these wonderful young faces. I'd like to begin with a story about how I became a climate activist after I retired from my university teaching. About 6 years ago, around the time of the Paris climate agreements, several things happened. One was a climate march in Fairbanks, where I heard Ine Begay speak powerfully about how Indigenous spirituality means being connected to the land with respect and reciprocity. A friend and I later met with Ine to learn more about her perspective. And the second thing that time was hearing the words of Pope Francis in the Laudato Si, which is an encyclical about the moral and spiritual imperative to care for the earth and the most vulnerable people. That led to meeting with Call to Action, which is a Catholic group that was discussing the Pope's encyclical. Then a third thing was hearing that groups in Anchorage and Juneau were sponsoring film showings to raise awareness about the Paris climate talks. And I wondered if anything was happening in Fairbanks. And that put me in touch with Jessica Gerard. And we met in Gulliver's bookstore, which no longer exists, unfortunately, and decided there should be a film showing in Fairbanks. And then the next week there were 6 of us, and then 15, and we kept growing till we had to move to a larger meeting space. The 3 threads, the Native movement with Ine and the Call to Action group and Jessica Gerard, formed the core of what became Fairbanks Climate Action Coalition. And we now number in the hundreds of people who are involved. Our first actions were showing films about climate change. One of those was the film based on Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything. This film vividly shows how people living in remote places are being affected by the sea level rise and the intense storms and other changes related to increased carbon in the atmosphere. Watching these films left me with a strong feeling of empathy. And then when I realized that the US was largely responsible for that increase in carbon, I really felt the call to action. I knew that we needed to change our ways and to create a just transition into a more equitable and sustainable future. It was also clear to me that we needed people power to accomplish this change. The strength of FCAC, Fairbanks Climate Action Coalition, lies in the fact that it's built on the values of community, resilience, justice, democracy, and indigenous knowledge. As it says on our website, we are a growing group of concerned citizens motivated by the moral, spiritual, and scientific duty to take action and elevate voices calling for responsibility to each other, the earth, and all living beings. FCAC is made up of 5 active working groups: the Interfaith, Policy and Politics, Renewable Energy, and Regenerative Economy. I'm currently co-facilitator of the Interfaith Working Group, and I'll focus on that work, what we're doing. We represent 10 different faith communities and include others who do not necessarily identify with a specific faith community, but who recognize the spiritual underpinnings of this work, the moral and spiritual imperative that Pope Francis talked about. From the beginning, the Interfaith Working Group sought out the wisdom embedded in many different faith communities, as well as contemporary statements being made by faith leaders regarding care for the earth. One of our projects was to gather statements published by different religious faiths about climate change. And this collection is really impressive. And if you could share the screen, I'll give you a few examples of that. Okay, the first is from the Right Reverend Mark Latine, Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Alaska. And he wrote this in 2016, which is the time that we were doing an Earth Day celebration on and focusing on these climate statements. As Bishop of the Episcopal Church, I'm grateful that religious leaders all over the globe of every denomination have identified the growing environmental crisis as a primary concern for people of faith. Increasing numbers of church communities are challenging their members to make the healing of the environment a ministry priority through prayer, but more importantly, through action. Next slide, please. The second slide is an interfaith declaration of climate change that was written in 2009. I know that seems like a long time ago now, still true. And this was made from Interfaith Power and Light, which is an organization that exists across the country to work with many different denominations, and it was endorsed by 120 faith organizations. We recognize that climate change is not merely an economic or technical problem, but rather at its core is a moral, spiritual, and cultural one. We therefore pledge to join together to teach and guide the people who follow the call of our faiths. We must all learn to live together within the shared limits of our planet. And the next slide, please. So this one was not an official declaration from the Southern Baptist Convention, as you might guess. And in fact, many of the declarations are actually anti-environment, but this is a faith writer who is a Southern Baptist and feels it important to make this statement. And it was signed by 750 Southern Baptist leaders and lay people. We have recently engaged in study, reflection, and prayer related to the challenges presented by environmental and climate change issues. These things have not always been treated with pressing concern as major issues. Indeed, some of us have required considerable convincing before becoming persuaded that these are real problems that deserve our attention. But now we have seen and heard enough to be persuaded that these issues are among the current era's challenges that require a unified moral voice. Thank you. If you can stop screen sharing, please. Thank you. So for an Earth Day celebration in 2016, we asked local faith leaders to offer a statement from their faith tradition regarding care for the earth. We heard statements from Baha'i, Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian perspectives, as well as Indigenous Alaskan. And for that event, I sat right in front and I found myself just mesmerized by the strength, the power, the depth of these statements. There was no preaching, there was no name calling, there was none of the bitter strife that can separate people over religious or political beliefs. Although they used different words to express it, all were affirming that as people of faith, we are called by God or Yahweh or Allah or Great Spirit to care for the earth. A powerful unity in those statements. I regret that we didn't record that event, but we do have copies of the national statements, and I'd be happy to share those if anyone is interested. You might put your email, let me know. Some of you may say, in response to this, well, getting together and singing Kumbaya is great and makes you feel good, but does it lead to action? And that's where our current project comes in. What the Interfaith Working Group is currently doing, it funded in part by a grant from Philanthropy for Active Civic Engagement, known as PACE. This involves visiting with faith leaders. We know that faith communities, when they're united for a cause, can make a difference. Think about Martin Luther King and other faith leaders who joined him in the civil rights movement. They weren't just singing, "We shall overcome," although singing was an important part of the movement. They were putting their lives on the line by marching peacefully, speaking out, and demanding change in the halls of Congress. Our goal for this year is to develop a relationship with 20 faith communities in the Fairbanks area. We begin by, and we've already conducted 4 of these. We begin by listening and learning about what they are currently doing to make their sanctuaries more sustainable and how they envision their relationship to the greater Fairbanks community. Some groups are at the stage of seeking an energy audit to find out what they need to do to make their buildings more energy efficient. Some have already done that and are ready to begin the process of solar installation. We found that a few congregations have completed the requirements to become certified from their denominations as an earth care program. For example, University Community Presbyterian Church has become a green sanctuary, and the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Fairbanks is well on its way to its certification. Others are just beginning to consider installing LED lighting. And so, question, why are we focusing on faith communities? How is this relevant to the work? Well, first, while it's important for individual households to adopt practices that reduce their carbon footprint, there's power in collective action to do this. I'll just give you a story or as an example. Several years ago, maybe, I don't remember how many years ago actually, but it was maybe 5 or 6. An example is I was considering participating in a program that would require, it was a 2-year program and located in North Carolina, and it meant flying 8 times across the country. And the one thing that was holding me back was the carbon footprint of those flights. And I'm a Quaker, and the Chena Ridge Friends meeting came together and they did carbon offset. They created a chart and people signed up, and somehow there was a calculation of how much carbon offset there would be for somebody agreeing to ride his bicycle to work once a week, or to lower the meat intake of your diet, or use a rack to hang up your clothes instead of the dryer. All those little things, but they added up, and they added up to a carbon offset for my flight. That's an example of how a group can work together. And so it was a win-win-win because I got to do the program and people were working together, and we did reduce the carbon footprint. So another reason for reaching out to faith communities is that it may help to bridge the political divide in climate conversations. We're finding that congregations are made up of people who worship together but have different political views. I've seen people with very different points of view come together to feed hungry people and provide housing for the houseless. They can also come together to care for the earth, and they can work to make their buildings more energy efficient. They don't have to call it mitigating climate change, and some people resist that, but they can call it saving money, but it has the effect. I recently read a report in Worldview by Tobias Muller, a political scientist who studies how religious groups respond to problems, including environmental crises and racism. He's found faith-based organizations that have committed to divest from fossil fuel companies. Muslim organizations have promoted green Ramadan seminars. Others have worked together with scientists and activists to protect national parks. Muller echoes the message of well-known climate scientist Katharine Hayhoe. I hope some of you got to visit when she came to Alaska. She visited Alaska in 2019. And the message was that in speaking to faith-based people about climate change, framing the message is important. And as Darcy said earlier, that thinking about how scientists communicate their message is really important. And so finding ways of framing that message that people respond to is an important piece. Finding common ground, telling stories, and focusing on shared values will get us further than complex graphs and charts. Muller suggests that in talking with people whose views are different from yours, one should avoid arguments and debates and focus on what you both care deeply about, which may be the health and well-being of your community. I especially appreciated this question. What do you need to be a good ancestor? He says this question opens up expanses of common ground in a conversation. Finally, the Interfaith Working Group, as an integral part of FCAC, supports the activities of other working groups. For example, we helped sponsor a prayer vigil for the Arctic Refuge, and we've participated in the trainings for Just Transition. In addition to the individual visits with faith leaders, we've sponsored 2 gatherings focused on energy efficiency. One was in person pre-COVID and one was virtual. We showed examples of what other faith communities have done to be more sustainable and had speakers talking about energy audits, ground source heat pumps, Solarize Fairbanks, and how to finance these projects. One group has produced a brochure, has produced a brochure called Earth Stewardship, Guide to Energy Efficiency, which we share with the faith communities we visit. I'm also willing to share that brochure. We have also distributed copies of a book by Rebecca Barnes called 50 Ways to Help Save the Earth, How You and Your Church Can Make a Difference. This book was also distributed to members of the Tanana Valley Ministerial Association. And members of our group have also distributed copies of the book Drawdown to members of the GVEA of the Golden Valley Electrical Board. I think you'll hear more about Drawdown from other speakers today. We're at the stage of building relationships. Each congregation we meet with will have different ways of moving forward. We seek to be good listeners, and we've had a training session on how to listen to others whose views may be different from our own. We seek to build bridges across different worldviews, political perspectives, cultures, and faiths to mobilize our community for climate action. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Charley. I think Katie had a few words to say.
Yeah.
Your next speaker.
We've heard from 2 powerful speakers so far, and as we were thinking about the speakers to invite this year, we highlight efforts that are taking steps. Last year, Anae Begay posed this challenge. She said, we need to organize our communities and have Indigenous voice. And Darcy is showing us a step that Tanana Chiefs Conference is taking in that direction, with gathering all the TCC communities thinking about climate change with their new resolutions. Last year, Terry Chapin challenged us to shift social norms. You're like, oh, great, Terry. You know, he wrote a book about it. And if you haven't read his book yet, Terry Chapin and Charley is showing us a step toward achieving that challenge. To me, this is giving so much hope. We're building hope here through this conversation. You know, how do you change social norms? Charley's saying one way to do that is by going straight to where people trust and where they draw their values from. Our next speaker is directly following the challenge that Nanej Peter posed for us last year. She said, youth need to be leaders in climate change. And our next speaker, Dr. Alex HIRSCH, is going to be talking about how do we train climate leaders. So, and our final speaker is kind of going to Kim Mcnet and Kaitlin. Oh, Kaitlin, what's your last name? I don't have it in front of me. And Kaitlin, they are giving us a recipe book for putting process into action. So before Alex takes the mic, just give a thumbs up emoji or party emoji, or turn your camera on and wave if you are a student. If you're a student, if you consider yourself a student, party emoji. Brody, you're not the only student here. Okay, come on, Nolan. Yes, I see a Lindy. Come on, Lindy. Any kind of emoji. Alex considers himself a student. I like this. All right, Jolene, Shelby, Sierra, yes. Okay, so we have a lot of students here. If you consider yourself a teacher or educator, give a wave or some kind of emoji. Suzanne, I see you. Retired teachers count too, Don Gray, Miss Musics, Mike Music. If you give an emoji if you call yourself a climate researcher, a climate change researcher. Eugenie, you get a yeah. All right, so we have a diverse representation here. Raise an emoji if you call yourself just climate curious. Is that a term? Can we make that a term? Climate curious? Christy, yeah, Darcy, yeah, Nolan, great. And then I see we have people from Dillingham and from Shagaluk, from places far-reaching across the state. So this is our conversation to bring us together and continue making progress toward the goals. Oh, I forgot to say, Kim, I see if you consider yourself a climate action advocate, give an emoji. That's the last one. Yeah, there you go. Yes. All right, excellent. So now, Dr. HIRSCH, you have a better idea of who's in our audience, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Katie. Thanks for pumping up the crowd right before I take the stage. I especially appreciate that. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alex HIRSCH, as Katie mentions, and I'm a political theorist at UAF. I'm also the director of the Honors College. I'm just really excited to be here, and I'm very grateful to Eugenie and Katie both for generously inviting me to appear, and I'm honored to be here with my fellow panelists and inspired already by some of the messages that we're hearing from Darcy and from Charley both. And I sort of view this Solve Climate 2030 event as a kind of opportunity to convoke a contact zone. I'm a big fan of contact zones, which is to say intersectional spaces where people who wouldn't otherwise meet one another can, and where felicitous conversations can develop and surprising connections can emerge. And I see this as an opportunity for a kind of contact zone to emerge around this theme of solving climate. And I'm going to try to be brief in my comments if I can, and not remain on the soapbox for too long, because I'm eager to get to the conversation part and the discussion part and the question and answer part of the evening. So I will try to be brief, and I'll apologize before I begin. I'm suffering from some sort of solar blindness, and so if I appear to be squinty, it's not because I'm suspicious of you in any way whatsoever. Don't take it personally. It's not about you whatsoever. So as Katie mentions, my role on this panel, I think, is sort of to invite all of us to think a little bit about what the role of the university can be in this solving climate movement that we're discussing. And from my perspective, I'm really excited to kind of report a little bit on the Climate Scholars Program, which Dr. Katie Spellman is also involved in. She's a faculty fellow within the Climate Scholar Program, so is almost Dr. Kristen Tim. And we have a number of other amazing staff members, and we have some amazing students some of whom are here tonight, which is thrilling. And this is a program that we've been piloting this year, in which we have specifically designed to grow our climate leaders, to present a grow your own climate leader solution for Alaska. And in particular, with the Climate Scholars Program, we focus on the engagement of University of Alaska Fairbanks students in solutions-oriented climate work in Alaska and beyond. So if you could, Eugenie, move us to the next slide. In this sense, the Climate Scholars Program is really inspired by a vision of what the modern university can be, right? Not just a kind of warehouse for archiving information, but also a catalyst for transformative responses to the intensifying existential threats that are challenging humanity and the planet. And to my mind, that's what publicly engaged universities should do. It's what they can do, right? Play a major role in bringing together communities across sectors to generate the knowledge and the moral courage and the creative powers that our times require. In order to do so, universities, including UAF, must overcome the limits that are imposed by many standard practices of contemporary academia. And those of you who have been to college or are in college now may recognize some of these standard practices, including the compartmentalization of knowledge production, the disconnection from broader communities, institutional inertia. This is really where the Climate Scholar Program comes into focus. So Eugenie, if you could go to the next slide. We are trying to modernize the student experience. And here you can see some Climate Scholar Program themes, which I can talk about in much greater depth during the question and answer period, but you can at least take a look at some of the amazing work that Katie and Kristen have been doing and operationalizing over the course of the last year. Of course, our program design, within our program design, we highlight the importance of cultivating a data-driven approach to understanding rapid environmental change. But in particular, we value actionable science. And that's what we're trying to set in motion at the undergraduate level at UAF, is actionable science, right? Catalyzing change. And this is a value that very much came from listening to students. You know, there are a lot of students who come to the University of Alaska Fairbanks because they want to study climate change in all of its various aspects. There are students who want to study climate change in terms of the cultural aspects of climate, and others who want to study, you know, the atmospheric dynamics associated with climate change. But what we found is that there are many students who are finding that though they were developing in their comprehensive understanding of rapid environmental change, very few were finding that they were growing in their capacity to actually do something about climate change. And that's something that the Climate Scholar Program is trying to change. And we are doing this by supplementing classroom instruction with out of the classroom experiences. And there are many examples. We provide our students with climate-based internships in the arts and sciences, and also in the realm of policy development. We have, for instance, a climate-based internship in Juneau. One of our most recent graduate students who's recently graduated, Casey Casort, for instance, she undertook one of these internships in Juneau, and she was able to develop her capstone thesis project within the Climate Scholar program into a law. She wrote a law, and the law was passed and adopted by the legislature because she was working as a staffer within Juneau. And this is sort of an example of what the Climate Scholar program wants to actualize and achieve for students, not just to remove barriers to academic success, but also to position students to be doing something about climate change. Casey, she wrote her senior thesis, her capstone project was on climate impacts on telehealth in the state of Alaska. You can read more about her online, find out more about the law that she was able to pass as a staffer. But there are other examples. Beyond internships, we also encourage international climate exchanges where our students can go to other universities in Copenhagen, in New Zealand, for instance, where there are kindred programs, kindred institutions that are trying to mobilize climate leaders from different kinds of global perspectives. And so we want to foment a global kind of level of cohort where our students can liaison with other students who are doing similar climate work from all over the world. We also provide summer research intensives. Katie Spellman is leading a particularly inspiring and interesting, engaging summer research intensive this summer. We have another summer research intensive that is going to take place in Southeast in Gustavus through a partnership with the Tidelines Institute. And if you haven't heard about Tidelines, I would strongly encourage you to check out what Tidelines Institute is up to. Really interesting work going on there. We also encourage our students to engage in the Model Arctic Council. The Model Arctic Council is a little bit like Model UN, except that it's modeling the Arctic Council, and our students have the opportunity to fly to different sites all over the circumpolar north. The Model Arctic Council, sometimes it's held in Russia, so other times it's in Reykjavik or Norway. It's every year it moves to a different location within the Arctic North, and students from all over the world descend on this Model Arctic Council exercise in which students are meant to model out and game out different environmental challenges and work together in teams to create solutions to different climate challenges associated with life in the North. We also encourage our students to participate in a new climate makerspace on campus that is focusing on again, building solutions to climate challenges that are live and real and emerging from within communities all over the state. And then could we move, Eugenie, to the next slide? So I want to describe how the experiential opportunities that we built into the structure of our program also focus on capacitating students with skills-based learning. And here you can see, this is research that was done on in terms of a climate workforce survey, and looked at specifically what types of skills students need to develop in order to be successful in climate change areas and in sustainable careers and vocations related to sustainability. And you can see the array of skills. And of course, as many of you will know, the area of climate-based vocations is a very dynamic and expansive area, right? So the challenge for us is to help to capacitate our students to develop skills that may be conducive to jobs that have yet to be invented. Okay, and so that's something that we've incorporated into our program design as well, in terms of our workforce survey. And then Eugenie, if you go to the next slide, you can see what issues or theories, according to the literature, on climate workforce should be focused on to remain cutting edge in the field of sustainability science. And you can see all of these different areas that we have made key within our program in terms of developing a kind of student learning outcome assessment model. Okay, so I think the final slide, the penultimate slide, Eugenie, also illustrates that in order to train future climate leaders in the arts of actionable science in the state of Alaska, we need to focus on a host of key competency areas related to the skills assessment work and the climate workforce assessment work that just would contribute to our student learning outcome assessment model. And you can see the different areas of competency that we prioritize within the Climate Scholar program. And these include, for instance, anticipatory competence. And this is sort of about helping students to organize resources for a preferred future, right? And being able to think about the future in different ways that, that support a comprehensive vision of aspirational becoming. This might include, for instance, depending upon the research area that the student wants to focus on, it might mean becoming especially competent at statistical modeling. It might mean developing a kind of predictive analytics competency, right? Another area that you can see highlighted here in terms of a key competency is interpersonal competence. And one thing that sort of comes to mind for me here, I mean, this is about developing social intelligence, but it's also about something that Charley was talking about earlier in terms of, building out a kind of, repertoire for climate communication. Being an effective communicator requires strong social and communication skills, and also could mean exercising, diplomatic judgment within the context of a fractured media landscape or in the context of, polarized political culture. Okay, and so we want to make sure that students are developing that competency as well as a competency in terms of futures thinking. And then we have strategic competence here as well, and that can mean a variety of things from environmental risk assessment to data visualization skills. It would just depend upon the student in terms of what their goals are. And then there's systems thinking here, which is another area of competency that we emphasize. Systems thinking is an approach to integration that is based on the belief that the component parts of a system will act differently when isolated from the system's environment. So this is sort of like what the field of ecology does, right? I mean, it's sort of based upon a similar principle. And systems thinking is really especially adapted, I think, not only to interdisciplinary thinking, where students are invited to integrate traditional fields of knowledge and then to mobilize those integrated fields in a kind of solutions-oriented way, but something we talk about a lot at the Climate Scholar program is actually transcending beyond interdisciplinary learning and getting to an omnidisciplinary way of seeing. And I think that that's very strongly related to systems competency. There's also, we have normative competence here as well. And by that we mean a theory of justice, right? We mean policy analysis. We mean environmental ethics. We want all of the work that our students do to be informed strongly, not only by a kind of authentic curiosity to unconceal knowledge, but to allow a kind of theory of justice to inform their method of inquiry as well. So this is what the Climate Scholars Program is all about. Our goal is to stimulate our students to become change agents and leaders and visionaries within the state of Alaska and well beyond. And I think, Eugenie, I may have a last slide. Yes. For more information, you can go to our website. We also have there a portal for students and prospective students to apply to the Climate Scholar program. And there's a lot more information there. And as I said earlier, I hope that during the question and answer period, some questions arise so that I can speak in greater depth about what it is that we're doing with the Climate Scholar program and how in particular it fits in with the other amazing things that these other panelists are doing as well. So thanks so much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Alex. That's great. And I'm sure you'll have lots of questions for Alex. But before we have questions for him, we have one more set of speakers, and that's Kim Mcnet and Kaitlin Vadla. And they're associated with the Homer and the Central Kenai Peninsula Drawdown projects, and also the Cook Inlet Keeper. And so their focus is, for Pete's sake, from collaboration to drawdown solutions. And so you heard Charley mention the book Drawdown, and I think Kim and Kaitlin will tell you a little bit more about what drawdown is exactly and how they're going about implementing some of the ideas that are put forth in the book.
Thanks, Eugenie. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Kaitlin Vadla. I use she, her pronouns, and I live on Tanana lands here in Clam Gulch. And my ancestors are European and Scandinavian. My grandparents came here from Norway and homesteaded in Big Lake. And I feel really grateful to have been able to grow up here and live in an Alaska as beautiful and abundant as it is, because it's been so well cared for by Indigenous Alaskans who've lived here literally for thousands of years. And I just feel grateful to be here with all of you. Thanks for letting me be a part of this. And we're at a really exciting moment in history where we get to move forward together and create a lot of amazing things together. I work as the regional director at Cook Inlet Keeper in Soldotna, Alaska, at our community action studio. And over the past couple of years, Kim and I'm also an artist, I paint, and Kim and I dabble in another art form, which is organizing community. And we've been involved in these community-led climate action projects, which have been really successful beyond our wildest hopes. And we created an action kit to share an example model of, how to organize a local climate solution project based on, the successes and mistakes that we made. And we want to kind of just dive in and show you what we've created. It's sort of hot off the press, and we are eager to get your feedback for how to bring it and share it to a wider audience in Alaska, and also maybe how to make it better and more useful for communities. But I'll let Kim introduce herself, and then we can kind of dive in and look at the action kit.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kaitlin. Yeah, and thank you so much, Katie and Eugenie, for inviting us here, and these other speakers for all those wonderful insights. I feel like these are all very synergistic approaches to addressing climate solutions in new ways. So we're really excited to be here and to be involved in the discussion after. So my name is Kim Mcnet. I live down in Homer, which is also Dena'ina traditional lands and Sugpiaq traditional lands. And I would just like to second Kaitlin's enthusiasm and gratitude for living in such a rich environment with such great communities. I moved here about 12 years ago, and I think I'm here to stay. So, and Katie Spellman was actually involved with that, which is sweet. So I'm just going to dive in and talk a little bit about, what we're going to present with you here tonight. So I've been involved with the Homer Drawdown Solution project that was inspired by some of these awesome community-led action activities that were happening in the Central Peninsula. So we're going to give you a little tour here of the climate action toolkit that has been developed sort of as a framework to follow based on the strategy and the model that has been our approach. We have a couple beautiful, short, succinct videos that we're going to share that that feature Kaitlin's lovely storytelling illustration. And we'll go into a little bit on our examples of community solutions that we have implemented here locally. And then we really look forward to having a discussion, including, questions, dialogues, any way that we can maybe help encourage, inspire, or provide any tips or tricks for starting community projects.
Yeah, and I invite you, I cannot sit still, so I invite you to get up and shake around and have a dance party as we play you this 50-second video, which will do a better job of encapsulating the action kit than we could do by talking at you. So here you go, hopefully it works.
Hi, I'm Sue Mauger, scientist and executive director at Cook and the Keeper. Through decades of fieldwork, we've documented rising stream temperatures in the Cook Inlet watershed due to global climate change. In 2019, the hottest summer Alaska has ever had, we measured water temperatures lethal to salmon. 2019 was also the year Cook and the Keeper joined with community members to address climate change in a new way, by seeing it not as an inevitable catastrophe, but a solvable problem. To do this, we used Project Drawdown, an analysis of the 100 most effective solutions to reverse global warming. But we had to find our own way from their global scale model to a project that fit our region. Neighbor to neighbor, we'd like to share what we've learned in an action kit for small groups of people working together on real projects. Let's roll up our sleeves wherever we live and lead change in our communities. To learn more and to download the action kit, please visit our website.
Thanks for watching. I hope you had a dance party. We had a wonderful experience. Basically, we found Drawdown, and lots of folks in our community were sort of feeling this hopelessness about how huge of a problem climate change is and how fast it's coming and how unstoppable it seems. And even the folks who were our fiery volunteers were just like sort of, it was doom and gloom to the point of inaction. And so Drawdown, because of its reframing, basically, it like just kind of changed everything for us. And so we went through this process and we created this action kit, and we'd love for you to read the whole thing, and we're just going to kind of zoom through it right here. But really what we hope to do with it is to help communities to find projects that they can get done in about a year or two. So to actually implement a real solution, get it done, see the success of it, and then watch it scale and create other change, like a ripple out effect. So the action kit itself has 4 parts, and they're based on our learning experience and our going through this process in the communities of Kenai, Soldotna, and in Homer. And the 4 main steps that we went through are to reframe our thinking, and then to gather our community, to choose the solution that we want to start with first, and then to act on our idea and to implement the solution. So this is sort of what the process looks like. Basically, it's a 1.5-year process, and Drawdown really helps us to reframe climate change as a math problem. It's solvable. We have all the solutions. We need to do all of them. The challenge is really just to pick the one that works well in your community and to start with something, to implement it. And then also there's this idea of middle out change that comes from the Pachamama Alliance. And so as activists, you know, sometimes we get stuck at the top level policy change. We need a carbon tax, or, you know, sometimes we get stuck at the bottom where we need to have individual action. We need to ride our bikes more, and we forget sometimes that there is this middle out area, especially as Alaskans, where we have a lot of leverage and a lot of power. And when we change a local institution, or we implement something that is visible, people can point at it and be like, hey, well, why don't we have solar panels on our church? Or why don't we do that? And then that seemingly small solution is actually an elegant, direct, and really efficient way to get to solve climate change in the next decade. So basically that's the reframe. And then we gather our community. We have a kickoff meeting about Drawdown, and then monthly we go through the chapters of Drawdown, which are sections: food and agriculture, transportation, land use. And we strategically invited panelists and experts from our local community that perhaps weren't passionate about climate change, but they helped to get everybody on the same page and to brainstorm solutions with community members that would really be relevant in our local area. So we did that, and then we democratically chose a first solution, and then we started to implement it. And we set concrete goals, like what can we actually get done in a year? Okay, let's do it. And we did it. We did it imperfectly, but the process itself is what we outlined in this action kit. And there's a lot of, it's a very in-depth document, but also practical. It's fun and beautiful. It's intended for groups of 2 or a group of 100 people, and it's really meant for an Alaskan audience. It was made with love. None of us are professionals, but we hope that it's really applicable. It has things in here like, going through a kickoff meeting and some tips and tricks from our expert facilitators and community activists. So there's a lot of specific stuff in here, I think, that will help to create climate action projects all over the state. And let's see, maybe I'll let Kim talk a little bit more about this later, because they actually had to initiate this process during a pandemic. So there's tips in here, like if you're doing this online, here's some helpful tips, and if you're doing this in person, here's some ideas. When we got to the point where we in Soldotna chose our first solution, we ended up landing on community compost. And I think one of the best parts about Drawdown is that, it really kind of messes you up, because you've been told your whole life, like, if you care about climate change, you need to install solar panels, you need to ride your bike, you need to do XYZ. And with Drawdown, like, the top solution is refrigeration management. And you're like, what? But, if implemented on a global scale, this solution will actually reverse climate change insanely effectively. And so I think that one of the other second and third top solutions are, eating a plant-based diet and reducing food waste. And so that's where the community compost solution kind of grew from. Most of the things we throw in the landfill are compostable. If we keep those out, we actually draw carbon out of the air and turn our compost and our soil into a carbon sink. When it's in the landfill, it turns into methane, this terrible greenhouse gas. And so you're like, wait, like, the science is actually giving us these really impactful solutions, and they're cheap. Everybody can compost. You don't need to buy an electric vehicle. Actually, these are some of the most effective ways to not just stop or slow. Like, if you're driving toward a cliff, like, you don't want to just slow down and still drive off the cliff. You want to stop and turn around and restabilize the climate. So we actually think this is the most effective way to do it, the fastest way to do it, the most elegant and direct way to do it. I'll shut up really soon. So the other solution that we implemented in the Central Peninsula was a Solarize solution, which has been spearheaded in Fairbanks and in Anchorage and down in the States. But we ended up getting over 80 households and businesses across the peninsula to install over 500 kilowatts of solar capacity, over $1.5 million just in the last year of clean renewable energy. And that offset over 236 tons of emissions. And that's that's every year. Like, these are huge numbers, and we're small. Like, there's just a couple people who care, who are like, we have to do this. And I think people think, oh, community solutions, they're just fluff. Like, no, they're insanely, by the numbers, impactful. And that's what we want this action kit to show, and to help other people do solution projects in their area that fit what they need. Kim, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. So down here in Homer, we got inspired by hearing about this sort of book club based format for coming up with a solution. A group of dedicated individuals got together and organized and initiated that. So, we had one awesome in-person, like 100 people meeting, and then the pandemic hit. I'm really grateful we got to have that one in and see each other in person, but then we switched it to an online format, and it actually worked out quite well. So within your community, I feel like if your community is more spread out or it's more centralized, you could do either or both probably. I also do want to point out that, Drawdown is a published book, which that has a lot of appeal, but it's also an incredible web resource, which gets updated more frequently. So we've had over 200 people that have been actively engaged within this project. And I think, Homer really turned out in great numbers. There was just a lot of people from a lot of backgrounds that got involved. And it was really cool to engage in the dialogue that fostered climate literacy. So as number one solution being refrigeration surprises most people. Educating girls and establishing family planning, like those are huge solutions that often go overlooked. So it's really great to take a critical kind of analysis of what's going on, and then to great slide to show up. So like look around at your community and see what are our resources here. How many people do we have who are involved? What are their skill sets? What's our local environment? What does our place have to offer? And take that really slow, hard look at how these global issues are really applying to you locally. So that whole year-long process itself was extremely enriching and beneficial. We came up with and brainstormed myriad different ideas, refined them down to top 10 solutions, all of which were great ideas that we could do with volunteer force. And our group chose peatlands as a land use and in the land use and management chapter. So the chapter or the section is called peatland restoration and protection. And the amazing thing is that peatlands actually they store more carbon, twice as much carbon as all of the world's forests combined, though they cover only 3% of the Earth's surface. And we here on the Kenai Peninsula have a lot of peatland. And we also are in a situation where our landscape is undergoing rapid change, both with human, activity, direct human activity, but also the influence of climate. And decision makers and property owners and people are pretty broadly unaware that peat plays such a critical role in our climate, and our landscape right around us is part of this climate story and has occurred for a long time. So I just think it's fascinating that Homer chose a very complex land use issue and has taken an extremely interdisciplinary approach, integrating arts, education, policy, local government and management, and citizen science or community science data collection that can help inform us on how to make wiser decisions going into our future and reframe the thinking of our landscapes for their carbon value or their carbon assets. And we definitely hit some rocks along the way, and that's okay. The idea is that we're being explorative and experimental and thinking in novel ways and new innovative ways. So is everything gonna work out well? No, probably not. But something likely will. And considering how much area we have here that is covered in peat, by 2030, what actions we are doing now and the way we're influencing our culture, it could potentially have a very large impact. So I will stop there with that, or we're going to show you why middle out solutions are great strategies, and then we can, I guess, dive into our big group discussion. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, and I'll just say, save the date. We're going to do a virtual kickoff of the action kit on Earth Day, April 22nd. Just a quick panel. I'm hoping Kim can be on the panel. I should have asked you before. At lunchtime on Earth Day. So save the date. And here's the second video.
Hi, I'm Kagan Koski, a student from Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. My community is working to reverse climate change In just the past year, we've brought solar power to tons of homes in our area and started neighborhood composting. To do this, we use the overlooked superpower of middle-out change. Change can start from the bottom up with personal decisions like recycling, composting, and gardening at home. And change can start with big institutions, rewriting laws and policies from the top down. Often, we get hung up on these two areas of change. Individual actions sometimes feel too small, and top-down change sometimes takes too long. Our toolkit doesn't look at change from the top down or bottom up, but from a space too many people ignore, the middle out. Keep recycling, but look outside your home as well. Keep signing big petitions, but don't forget the power of your community. You have tremendous influence at the local level. Living where we live and being part of a community gives us all the power for meaningful climate action. Working together with our neighbors, let's unleash climate solutions from the middle out. To learn more and to download our action kit, please visit our website.
Thanks for watching. We can't wait to have a discussion.
All right, thank you so much, Kate and Kim, Kaitlin and Kim. That was terrific. I hope you, most of you or many of you, can join their Earth Day lunchtime meeting. And I mean, one of the reasons that we wanted to have Kim and Kaitlin come was so that some of you listening could get ideas about how to implement your own drawdown projects in communities and towns around Alaska. And I also definitely recommend that you check out the drawdown.org website. It's a really great resource, and they do update it a lot. And as they said, some of the solutions that they recommend are not what you would expect, like educating women and children, women and girls is one of the top solutions in terms of climate change. And there's some other surprising findings on there that I recommend that you look at. So with that, we can start taking some questions and get on with our discussion. So if you have questions, you can either you can unmute yourself and ask them, or you can type them into the chat. We can do either way, or you can also use your hand raising function in Zoom, and we can call on you as well. Yeah, and there's the Drawdown website right there.
Thanks to everybody that's been posting extra resource links in the chat too. All right. One, I wonder, oh, Jillian, go for it.
Oh yeah, good.
So I'm not necessarily new to understanding climate change. I've taken many courses through my schooling with geology, and I'm currently in a Alaska climate and weather class. And so, you know, I've actually, you know, come to be aware of Project Drawdown in the past, but I still feel like I'm still new with this. And so if I sound, I don't want to say ignorant, but I'm new into this. And so this question, I hope that I ask it the right way. Have there been talk about working with some of the refuse companies to either reduce the cost of having like at-home recycling pickup, or having that be just an option? Because I know, like down in Oregon, my family that lives down in Oregon, there's almost, you know, no trash picked up because most everything is recycled. I know they have more resources there, but I feel like if more people had an easier access to recycling, that they would do it more. I have several friends, and even the school that I work at, we just don't have it in our budget to have a recycling can available to be picked up, and we can't make it out to the recycling center within school hours, and teachers already work, you know, all these extra hours. And so I didn't know if that's something that has been talked about, to work with refuse companies to either reduce or you know, get rid of the cost of having recycling bins be picked up, because it's part of the taxes that are paid in Oregon. You pay taxes to have your recycling picked up. and it's just taken care of. And they have compost piles that are picked up automatically. So I don't know if that's something that's been talked about to be done here in Alaska or not.
Kaitlin, any insights, or anyone on the call, any insights on that?
I know that in Anchorage, there are some companies that do that. It's funny because part of the project, any climate project, is it's like the conversations you have are as important as the change itself. And this process that we're going on, I can just speak to our experience, is that no one really knows that in our borough, we as borough taxpayers pay $7 million a year to have a dump where we throw all the things. But because we don't have to pay for that service, it's hidden. And so this idea of like fees for service is a really great way when you talk about like implementing change at the school or in your small town or at the borough. It can be having these conversations. Well, hey, I know that my cousin does this, and like, why don't we do that? Is a great way, because that's what leads to behavior change. Like, we don't really change our behaviors often because we know that we should. We do it because of peer pressure. And so I'm very curious if others on the call have experience specifically with that.
I don't know if Dawn or Joanne, if you had, if your questions were related to comments about that, or if they were different, but if they're related, feel free to chime in. Or if they're not, if they're different, we'll get to you. All right, you guys are being quiet, so I think they were different. I will say, I know that in Fairbanks, it's been a topic of discussion in the borough about recycling and, you know, putting it in the budget and taking it out of the budget. It's just been an ongoing battle basically in Fairbanks. And so what we're left with is our recycling center that has, as noted, very weird hours that are difficult to make it difficult to actually do any recycling at all. I guess, you know, most of us in Fairbanks do live in houses that have yards, and so composting is an option in that perspective, but it's really hard to recycle in Fairbanks.
And even down here in Egg River, it's very difficult to recycle. The landfill, it has, like you said, certain hours, and unless you pay an extra $20, $30 a month to have your recycling picked up, you have to find a way to make it out there at a certain time. And it is free to take it to the landfill, but it's a lot more difficult when, you know, people have busy schedules. So thank you. It was just kind of something that I thought about when we were talking about changes and thinking about what is done in other places as well. So thank you.
All right, now is a good question.
Joy, you had a related comment?
Yes, I did. I wanted to tell you, so my home here is in rural Alaska, in where are we? Southwestern interior, within the Gash villages in the Iditarod area school district. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Alaska Patrol Litter and Recycling Program. Did I say it right? No, yeah, Alaska Litter Patrol and Recycling Program, also called the Flying Cans Program. And they've been doing their program since the late 1980s, I believe, where the cans, aluminum cans, and now plastic bottles, maybe for the last 6 or 7 years, have been collected in villages and communities, and can send them into hub villages like Galena or Aniak, anywhere where there's a Northern Air Cargo or Everett's Cargo, and they'll backhaul them for free. And then Allpar or somebody from a third party comes and picks them up there in Anchorage, and then they're recycled. So here in my village in Shagluk, the Anoka River School has been recycling since 1991. And that means aluminum cans and plastic bottles and a bunch of other things. But they're all taken out. The kids are involved. 100% of the kids are involved. The families are involved. We've been recycling here since 1991. And the cool thing is that the funds that are raised go back, not into the school budget, but they go back right to the kids. And the kids can, at least nowadays, go online and pick out some cool school gear that they would want, or, you know, fancy notebooks that, you know, we can't get out here in our villages, and things like that. So it's been, that program has been highly supported by Alpar and by the Flying Cans program. And one other thing, in our school district, I'm not sure how many other school districts have a student government collectively, but we're in a school district where we have 7 schools, and we're all geographically spread out, you know, immensely. And we've started a student government where the kids meet on Zoom or VTC. We started this, I think we've been going now for 15 years. And one of the things that they started, the kids had an interest in going green. So, you know, that was the words that they used. And so now our student government had created a resolution, a going green resolution, and all the schools on Fridays at 1 p.m. They do something green from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock for 1 hour a week, you know. And a lot of schools are already involved in recycling with the Alpar program and the Flying Cans program. And so this was just kind of a neat thing that our student government did, you know, collectively in the Iditarod area school district, because we take up a huge geographic area. Another thing that's been really powerful in the interior anyway, and I believe in other villages too, is the IGAP program. And I don't remember what it stands for, but that's another program that involves a lot of recycling within the communities. We're real lucky. I think it's Ruby Marine that does backhaul also, and I'm not even sure contractually what kind of program they have where they'll backhaul old freezers and old trucks and batteries and stuff like that. So there has been a real strong ongoing effort to do that type of environmental intervention. So if that answers anybody's previous questions or comments, I can send information on that to anybody too. That's all. Thank you.
Should I also send the links for Climate Scholars to your seniors? They should all be applying. Don Gray, we're coming to you, and Christy, you're on deck.
Mute. Okay. It's the little things that I get all hung up on, and like forgetting to turn my volume or my unmute my, anyway. One great, I was really getting excited. I just couldn't keep up writing fast enough when both Kit and names Kim, oh, 2 Kims, no.
Kim and Kaitlin.
Kim and Kaitlin, thank you. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much, Kaitlin. Yeah, I couldn't write it down fast enough. All those that just flew by on the screen. But it reminded me too that one great asset we have here in Alaska is that there are an enormous number per capita of former Peace Corps volunteers and former VISTA workers who are, as for the Peace Corps, you know, Charley Basham right there was a Peace Corps volunteer, and her husband, Lynn Basham, were in Tagalog land, Philippines. My wife was in Panama. I was in India. There were just, there are lots and lots, dozens, scores of these people here in the state. Many of them are kind of old, like our generation, but have had experience working with people who want to do change, and they've got to start somewhere. You guys are way ahead of things, but there were many people in poor countries around the world who would like to have the things that we have in this country. And unfortunately, on the way from there to here, a lot of pollution gets created in the world, and this gets very complicated. But anyway, my message is that what Alex HIRSCH is dealing with there at the university is trying to bring this into the 21st century of how to get change in the world safely, and particularly how to prevent climate damage or damaging it more than it has occurred so far. I don't know, Charley, you're looking inquisitive on that. What do you think about the resource that we have here in the state of Alaska with RPCVs?
I think it's a great idea. People that have had those experience, cross-cultural experience, it's really a valuable resource.
Thanks for that comment. Did anybody else want to follow up from that? Any of the panelists?
I would just mention, Don, that there's a master's thesis being written right now by a graduate student in the Arctic and Northern Studies program on the subject of VISTA volunteers in Alaska, and how transformative those VISTA volunteers have been as community members. And you know, I'd love to connect you with this student, because she's doing a lot, you know, interviews with as many former VISTA volunteers or former, you know, maybe Peace Corps volunteers would be interesting to her too, so that she can really just capture the impact that those, you know, force multipliers have had in Alaska and beyond.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex.
I just wanted to interject that on the call also is Ben Betker, who is a co-conspirator. He wrote the action kit, all the copy and content for it, and was part of building it. And he is a former Peace Corps volunteer, and his one of our next steps is to share it with that community of former Peace Corps and VISTA volunteers to get their thoughts and ideas, because yeah, you know, there's so much overlap, and so many of these solutions are, I think Kim was saying this, they are zero regret. You know, it's almost a bonus that they help solve climate change, because they also make our world more equitable. They improve the economy. They, you know, make cities more walkable and healthy. So it's like a bonus. So.
And that's Ben Bettinger?
Ben Betker, Boettger.
And give your fans a little wave here. Come on, yeah. Give us a little wave. Come on. All right. Okay, never mind.
Hello.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to get in touch. Thanks.
Great idea, Don. Christy, you had a follow-up comment?
I had a follow-up comment to Jayleen's comment about recycling, and I just want to thank Kaitlin and Kim for your focus on the first step of reframing. There's a lot of joy that's happening right here in this session together. There's a lot of smiles and laughter and joy, and you know what, you're right that some of these solutions are easy and we can do them and find you know, that we enjoy them, and they bring us, you know, some like new ways of thinking totally. So I have a quick story to share about that. I grow potatoes, and I haven't been successful here in Alaska until last summer. Moved to Alaska 3 years ago from Montana, and I decided to just try. I had piles and piles of cardboard sitting around that I hadn't yet taken to the transfer, or not to the transfer station, but to Fairbanks recycling. So I learned that you can, you know, compost cardboard. So I just laid it on the soil and put some bone meal and blood meal on top of that, got my leaves that had been stacked up. Kim, you're nodding. Yep, you've heard of this. And then I'd done it before at a permaculture garden in Montana, growing right on the soil surface. So we just got a $5 bag of seed potatoes and planted them on the cardboard above ground, covered them up with some greenish black landscape fabric. And from that, as a family, we got 42 pounds of potatoes that were no dig. And then the cardboard recycled and became soil. So now my son, who was like, this is the stupidest thing ever. I'm not going to put, you know, potatoes and leaves on cardboard. What are you making me do, Mom? Now wants to have a competition and like have his potato plant and my potato plant, and then we have to tag, Katie, you'd like that. He wants us to tag our potato plants And then when it's time to harvest, you pick up the potatoes. There's no dig to this method. You just pick them up and then all the potatoes are there and then you just pick them off in the air. So like that, I refrigerator boxes, moving boxes, all of that cardboard is now in our yard and will be, you know, trapping carbon for years and years to come in the soil. So I just want to share that little story because that's a reframing that happened in our family. It's play. So some of these solutions are like playing with them. It's okay if we didn't have a great potato harvest, but guess what? We happen to, and now we're going to do it year after year. And pretty soon we're going to have no lawn. It's all going to be garden and compost.
I wonder, Charley, have you had to do any of that reframing process? Because that really stood out to me, Kaitlin, when you were talking about that. It, you know, by definition, communities of faith are communities of hope. And have you struggled with the same sort of need to reframe, or is it just like, yeah, talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah, well, I would just like to echo what she said about the joy, and I feel like rather than everything being fighting climate change or anti this, or you know, that there's a positive. I just am sensing in all of the presentations that there's a real, and I think that's a reframing, is reframing it in positive terms so that we're creating we're creating the future that we want to see. We're creating and we're, as I said, it can be creative and that, yes, and we have been talking about that with, I mean, Catherine Hayhoe talks a lot about the reframing and the importance of of putting things in terms. You take the scientific knowledge, but you put it in terms that people can I mean, I think the advantage of the drawdown too is that people can see, oh yeah, I can do that. That this is something positive that I can do, rather than just either giving up in despair or fighting. And I just think that positive action is really, really important.
Yeah, and that's one of the main tenets of Solve Climate by 2030 overall too, is to take a very positive, optimistic approach to this. So it's nice to see everyone's hitting on this.
I just dropped in the chat a TED Talk from Per Espen Stoknes. He's a Norwegian, so he's a psychologist who's advocating for climate communication that as being more effective when you get away from doom and dissonance to helping people connect it to their identity and reframing it. So we drew on his work a lot, and I wanted to share it in case folks are interested.
Can I ask you a question, Kim? Why were you passionate about peat? And can you tell us what peat is in case there's some folks on the call that have no clue what peat is?
Gosh, I'd love to.
I knew you would.
So I have an ecology degree, and I've always been interested in natural systems and find fascination with them. So I guess the thing that I guess I learned about peat just from that, like this is a landscape feature that we have, and it's very interesting. So the way that peat forms, so peat is, what it happens is it forms only in cold climates where you have vegetation such as sedges and sphagnum moss growing in water, basically. So there has to be the right amount of water. Not so much that it's like a lake and it's smothered the plants, but the plants have to, when they die, fall into that water. And when there's plants falling into the water that's cool, less decomposition happens. So a little bit happens, but slowly over millennia, these layers become compressed, and the new plant growth grows on top of that. The water table rises. That's the general concept. And you end up with these layers and layers and layers of compressed dead plants, basically plant fossils. And you give that enough geologic time and it turns into coal. So that's a big part of the carbon, story with that. So I guess like I have been involved with the Drawdown group, and our last sessions, we kind of narrowed it down to our top 10 ideas that we felt like we could implement locally here with the resources that we had. And Peatland, that chapter, ended up being one of them, largely because there is a local, the Kejimknik Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve is doing a lot of forward-thinking work regarding peatland management and making efforts to get peatlands on the global carbon market, and has been doing a lot of sort of that bigger, like level 3, level 4 scale action related to that. So we've had some amazing local specialists and resources here that we drew from. And our top 10 solutions, we decided that individuals would champion a solution and take a deeper dive look and think about and we'd propose these 10 ideas, and then we'd vote on that. So I opted for peat just because of my naturalist interest, and that ended up being what people selected, and I was like so surprised. And I think the thing, I was so surprised that people chose it. And really thrilled by that. But I think that the thing that was really compelling was that it was like peatlands aren't everywhere, but we have a lot of them in Alaska. And they actually are a really big part of the global carbon cycle, like way more than I think people ever suspected. And so the pathway forward for that was, I'm going to say not so straightforward. So that's where we hit some rocks, because there's a lot of complexity in that system. And how do you drive and direct that? But I feel like it's super innovative, and it's so Homer, because it's so our plans are like so interdisciplinary and involved. You wouldn't have to do something so complex. Fingers crossed, we come up with an idea that other people with peatlands in their communities can use. Mm-hmm. A big dreaming here for me would be like something that rural communities could use, because there are a lot of Alaskan rural communities that are on peatlands, or there's huge areas of peatlands.
I realized the role of peat in Scotch whiskey.
I wanted to say
about whiskey now. Oh boy, Dawn.
Oh yeah. I wanted to say too, because the cardboard conversation has come up, and it's so funny because well, I guess the discussion about where do your recyclables go? Where do they come from? How do they get recycled? What is that cost benefit analysis when you're thinking of like carbon as the budget? That's the type of critical thinking that the Drawdown model encourages. So take a look at it. Is establishing, pickup for recycling an effective thing for your community? Or do you like live somewhere where that's actually going to end up costing more fossil fuel than you'd save in the first place? Right. I have a friend across the bay who is like sequestering cardboard. Like that's his mission. He's got this, like, it's not a garden, but it's like layer upon layer upon layer of all kinds of stuff, like including all of this cardboard. So he's been like elevating his like land, and instead of taking that cardboard, instead of burning it or whatever, he has all these great cardboard ideas that are really related to peat, because it's kind of the same concept, right? Like you have this carbon material, you submerge it in water, as long as it doesn't release more methane, that's one of the very complex pieces of the story. You've got it now out of the system. And that's what peat has done over the course of millennia. It has been taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it down. I hope that kind of answered your question, and I love peat.
That's awesome. Charley, we'll go to you next, but I was talking about your project to a peatland scientist, Dr. Merit Turetsky. She calls herself the Queen of Peat. And she was like, did you know? And it actually reminded me of the model that TCC is striving for with their climate advisory committees movement. She said, did you know? And it's like a beautiful metaphor for collective impact. Melinda Chase, if you're still on, like the peat sphagnum, it's these little tiny like Muppet-like structures, and they interlock, and alone they can absorb a little bit of water, a little bit of carbon. Together, they create an environment. They lock their their little tiny branches together, and they can draw water from more than 2 feet down, and they can store carbon. So it's an individual plant, just like your bottom up versus top down, Kaitlin. An individual plant can only absorb so much carbon and can only soak up so much water, but together, the peatland itself is a metaphor for us, Kim, that we can through collective action. So, Charley.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that Interfaith Power and Light is an organization that exists nationwide, and they put out a movie. I don't think they've put it out. I mean, they're promoting it, called Kiss the Ground, which it really illustrates this whole thing of how soil can be a carbon sink, and it's a hope for the future. It's very positive, and I encourage. It's going to be shown during Earth Week, so it'll be shown. I think the 17th to the 24th, and people can register. It's free, but people can sign up to watch it through that week, and I really encourage you to do that. It's a great film.
Cool. Eugenie, we are about 10 minutes out. I'd like to ask Alex one more question. Does anybody have any more questions before kind of have a parting inspiration? And Eugenie wanted to highlight some of the teaching resources.
Yeah, maybe I'll just put those in the chat so that we can continue talking for the next year.
Okay. Yeah, they do have teaching guides, but as I was looking at your, Ben, your beautiful layout of that guide, it looked like a lesson plan that I could use in my classroom. Like, watch out, Nolan and Lindy. And like, that's something that I think we could actually execute within our community, our UAF community. Alex, I wanted to, oh, Ben, go for it. Unmute yourself.
Hi. I wanted to say that one thing that's interesting with Alaska and community-driven projects is that I haven't seen any research on this, but I think Alaska probably has a much higher, much above average per capita of scientists and engineers here, ecologists, biologists, researchers who are working on these things. And I think one reason why community-driven climate action like Interaction Kit has such a great possibility here is because there are those people working in their communities, and that's definitely helped the Hallmark Peatlands project. So one thing I'm working on with Action Kit is compiling a resources page for the website, and if I would really like to include something like a directory of researchers, so people who are interested in starting these climate projects in their community can get in touch with them and learn about what they're researching and the implications for their local climate projects. So I'll leave my email in the chat, and if anybody is interested in being part of the directory, let me know. Anyone who's doing research. So thank you.
Super. Thank you so much, Ben. To draw Alex's voice out one more time, since he's been pretty quiet during the panel discussion. Sorry, Alex, the drawdown is just hot. It's hot there. What's your dream, Alex? Like, when you imagine, because we have a lot of Climate Scholars students in the audience today, what do you imagine? What's your vision for a climate leader for Alaska? You know, as Kaitlin and Kim get old and gray, and Charley's on her porch saying, "Come on, you guys, you got this." You know, like, what is your vision for the students of the climate action future?
I mean, I think the vision is to help students to become Kim and Kaitlin and Charley, and right. I mean, to allow them to become honed as climate leaders, as my fellow panelists here clearly already are, and to give them, you know, a vision in terms of here's some change that you can facilitate, and then just to capacitate them with the skills that they need and the relationships that they need, and the inspiration they need to just go out and develop solutions to specific problems. And also, just to show them that learning isn't something that has to happen in the kind of traditional mode of passively absorbing information and then regurgitating it on an exam and then receiving a certificate and leaving and moving on to find, some kind of vocation that may or may not be related to that which you did during college, but rather that learning is something that can actually lead to outcomes that are meaningful and impactful for one's community, right? That learning can be something that is applied, and that can actively integrate perspectives, and can actively integrate cultures if it's done in a powerful way. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that I think Drawdown should be hot, and I think the goal is for students to become a part of Drawdown and to develop drawdowns of their own, and to rethink the university model as a place where this kind of work can be actively supported, and that undergraduate students can be a part of that work in all kinds of dynamic ways. So, but I mean, the students who are here could answer this question, perfectly as well. And I think, Katie, you nailed it. I mean, we want to advertise to prospective students all over the state that UAF is a place where this kind of work can be done, and so so hopefully there are some not just current students on this call, but also students who will think about applying to the Climate Scholar Program and come to UAF and become part of something that's really, to my mind, the most exciting thing happening at UAF right now.
And as Tori put in the chat, it can start even in elementary school, right? Tori, right? Suzanne, I know we got some teachers with their cameras on here. Suzanne and Juno, Tori and Salcha, Joy and Shagaluk, right? 100%, yes. Any last questions for our panelists before they're off the hot seat?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rochelle Adams, hi everyone. I just wanted to share and to thank everyone and say Masit Cho for all the work that you're doing. This is really incredible. And I'm just proud to see, younger folks out there and just really being engaged and really caring about our community. Alaska is it's a place that we all call home. And so I'm really grateful and happy to see all of that. I really want to encourage all of you doing this work and everyone I'm seeing on this panel to remember to lift up BIPOC people, Black, Indigenous people of color, and especially Indigenous people, as the first people of this land, and to hold space for them, because for so long we've experienced, erasure, racism and such. We have the historical trauma that we've been through, and we're not always it's not easy for us to always be in spaces and to have that privilege. And so I really encourage people, when you have that opportunity to uplift Indigenous voices, and especially as it relates to Native people being the original stewards of this land and having that really strong connection to the areas and that knowledge system that was in place for thousands of years. And so I just want to say that and to show my appreciation for everyone here. And just remember to hold space when you can. Some of you hold positions of privilege, whether you're in the institution or whatever it might be. And I think that, the more we try to build inclusivity and build on the diversity and our strengths that we all bring to the table, then I think that we all want to see that better future for Alaska. So Masit Cho, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I do thank Darcy for being here to speak about the TCC initiatives, because I love it's awesome. It's an example for all of Alaska, what they're trying to do to pull people together.
Yeah, she's my little cousin.
Oh, no way. You're helping her grow up right, Rochelle. Kim, you have your hand up? Yeah.
Thank you so much for that really meaningful comment and point, Rochelle. And I would love to get your contact information because our project and community has, like, we very much recognize those, you know, those values, that historical trauma, the fact that there are, you know, there are people here that have privileges, and we want to extend and help elevate those that have that may not have opportunities. That has been something our group has really wanted to try to achieve, and we're really unsure about how to approach it in a way that is something that we have sort of struggled to try to find the first steps to, you know, making a space and elevating those voices or individuals. But we like how, you know, I feel like that is something that we are still trying to figure out how to do in a respectful and equitable and effective way. So we would love to, whether you want to respond now or communicate with me or Kaitlin and Ben later, I feel like that is something that we intentionally wish to integrate with the guidance of representatives from those cultures and those people. So thank you so much. I will stop.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, there are many folks at Native Movement and others, elders who gave us feedback on early stages of the action kit and helped us guide our solutions, and we're really, really grateful for their guidance and hope to work with Native Movement and others to make to invite other artists, to invite other folks to write chapters of the action kit that are really relevant and helpful for places in rural Alaska and other people. And yeah, there's so much work that needs to be done, is deep core work. It's work that will take a long time and depends on relationship, and we're all in this for the long haul. You know, it's be kind to each other and reach out.
This is Melinda. I'd like to share a little perspective on that. I'm the tribal liaison. I work closely with Katie and a few other people, and from the region, from the interior region, so no Darcy and Rochelle. But one of the things, and I'm just going to put this out here, you know, there is expertise across the people that are here. And, you know, we have areas in Alaska that specifically like the Yukon Flats, right? That folks are looking at development, or the Ambler Road, or the area of the putting in the mine. And I think being able to characterize what those areas are doing for us right now in terms of drawing down, and their role and their significance in the climate and the carbon system. I think that is an area that would help when our own people are also trying to work on these fronts, sometimes dealing with our own people and our own institutions, right? And so I think that those are areas to consider, how to, I guess, portray what the land is providing from that perspective, and then helping to orient across the board, not only our people, but other people in the state. That is something to really consider. And, you know, some people may be uncomfortable with it, but we're at a point where those kinds of things need to happen, right? Because if we're, you know, for me, when I saw this 30 by 30, and I'm thinking 30% by, you know, 2030, what does that really mean, right? what is that? What are we going to go the distance for in Alaska? And how are we going to have some of these hard conversations looking at what the land provides? And so those are areas, you know, when you're thinking about, you know, how to work together can be considered.
Yeah. Yeah, Melinda. And do you feel like the forming of the climate change advisory group at a regional level is a good first step, or do you think that like it starts with talking, right? Yeah, even in Kaitlin, your diagram, it starts with talking and like creating hope. What do you think, Melinda?
So our elders, you know, in many of our regions used to have competitions, like traditional competitions of who can talk and speak a high language, but it was also an opportunity, and I heard an elder say this to me, it was an opportunity to provide people a chance to learn when they were, you know, in our traditional regimes. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're past the 7 o'clock mark. I already saw Alex's kids saying, "I'm hungry, Dad. Can we eat?" Thank you so much. This is a conversation that we hope inspires future dialogue. And then Eugenie, do you have any closing comments about the self-climate by 2030?
No, I would encourage you to check out their websites. I posted the link up there. And as I said, there were webinars happening worldwide and in all 50 states, and they're all going to be posted, not immediately, but pretty soon. All the recordings will be posted. And I think there are a lot of, if you go and look at all the web landing pages and at the variety of speakers that are talking, it's just an amazing resource to just see what's going on in the other states and other countries, and to just be informed. And hopefully we'll be back again next year. I think this was the second time, and I have a feeling that there was enough momentum to continue to keep this going. And I really thank everyone for participating, and I thank our panelists and their insights, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, panelists. Yeah, Linda, let's give the clap emoji. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, all of you for sharing your time, whether you're an audience member or panelist or question asker. Good night.